It's been such a pleasure for us to partner over the last couple of years. And I really want more people to understand some of the work that you're doing at Multiverse. What do you wish more people knew about the potential impact of improving diversity of the workforce of the future?
This is something I'm so passionate about, and obviously why I do my job, why I get out of bed in the morning. And there's so many valuable reasons why building a diverse workforce is so important. But the one that I really focus on is particularly when you think about reaching groups that have been historically underrepresented or excluded from educational opportunities or the workforce, and particularly family sustaining careers and higher paying jobs, is that we also have this huge tech talent shortage and companies that are being kind of forced to digitally transform, especially when you think about COVID, at a faster rate than they were maybe planning to. And that means you've got this incredible amount of tech jobs that you really don't have to go to college in order to do. A skills-first approach can train people to do these jobs. And then you've got all of this untapped incredible talent, high potential people that you could be reaching. So for me, it's really about bringing those two things together and then as a result, creating equitable routes into work.
We've talked about the wealth gap and how essentially Professor Thomas Shapiro at Brandeis put it this way. He said, if you look at echelons of wealth as a ladder, the rungs at the lower end of the ladder are closer together. So it's much easier to slide back down into deeper depths of poverty. And the rungs of moving out of poverty are further apart. And so this solution of completing the skills gap in a digital future is obviously paramount.
These structural issues have been issues for a really long time, and they can often feel quite intractable. I think sometimes when you're thinking about the kind of the grave, like how big the problem is in so many countries, and how challenging it can be to push for progress. And what's so great about this model is it really is a long-term solution, and it really is about future-proofing things for individuals. So when we think about COVID, for example, so many people lost their jobs, and a lot of people that were kind of at the most risk were in quite insecure employment anyway. And these sorts of this is a pattern that happens, right? At the moment, we are potentially approaching recession. We're seeing the cost of living increase in a lot of countries. That will hit a lot of the same families that were hit hardest by COVID, and there will have been international disasters before. Again, that the same families find themselves less and less secure when it comes to like economics, jobs, housing, all of these things. So by working with these with individuals in these underserved communities to give them skills like software engineering, data analytics, the jobs of the future, you're able to really kind of challenge that quite generational, quite structural wealth gap that we kind of hear about in research.
Siobhan, I'm curious about some of the challenges to achieving the mission that Multiverse has set out. It is ambitious, it's critical, it's important, but I imagine there are some roadblocks along the way. What are some of those roadblocks you've seen, and how have you worked to overcome them?
I think from a DEI perspective, obviously there's lots of different challenges, especially when you think about scaling a business like ours. But I'll answer from my area of expertise, which is really DEI. I would say it's accountability. And making sure that the kind of increase in public commitment we've seen from companies over the last couple of years really results in tangible opportunities for those that have previously not had access to them. And that can mean doing things quite radically different than they've been done before. For many, many years, the way to get a great job in the UK was to go to a top university. The way to get a great job in the US was to go and get to the highest league college that you could possibly do, accrue an incredible amount of debt as well along the way, and kind of just hoping that you'll land on that family sustaining employment. And we're saying actually businesses have a duty to society. I think consumers are very much holding businesses to account more than ever before as well, and actually saying, I will only use products, I will put my money where I really do believe that businesses are being serious about social justice. I think potential like talent are also saying, I want to work at a company that cares about diversity, equity and inclusion in ways that more than we've seen before. And at Multiverse, we really talk about walking the walk when it comes to our values and our mission, and making sure that we're creating the change we want to see in the outside world, very much inside Multiverse first.
Let me ask you this. So about the data and about the accountability, because, practitioner to practitioner, I absolutely understand how important it is to be super intentional. What kind of data would you recommend that startups across the industry track? What kinds of data do you think help really show people if they're moving the needle and making progress?
That's a great question. I am a big data advocate. I really don't know how it would be possible to do this role and have the influence I have without being able to have kind of a clear fact-based argument that's supported by evidence and data. So if there's anybody that's going into the DEI role, I would kind of strongly advocate that is the first place you start. You get buy-in into the importance of having a robust data monitoring process, and you build that trust as well within the organization that people want to share that data with you.
In terms of your day-to-day role, what do you think is the most misrepresented around being an executive diversity leader?
A misperception might be that it's very reactive, so that you spend a lot of time kind of just reacting to, unfortunately, we seem to be living in a world where there is constant tragedies and really quite constant triggering events for both our employees that work here, but also our apprentice community. They'll be impacted by obviously what's going on in their communities and the wider world. And there is some of that, but actually you're not constantly reacting to what goes on in the world, because you have to kind of have that long-term strategy as well, and things that you're really trying to move the needle on. Equally, people might have the misconception that you're constantly running events, or because of cultural moments or inclusion moments in the calendar. And yes, we do that. I'm incredibly proud of the cross-business pride campaign we've got at the moment, which is fantastic. But my job as a senior leader is more to think strategically, well, what does this company kind of do about ensuring that we're creating an inclusive environment for the LGBTQ plus community all year round, not just in June? And so it's actually much more of a strategic role, much more of a role in terms of partnering with other leaders, having influence, providing that education to other leaders so they can actually make long-term change and really commit to kind of moving the needle on specific things. So I think I'd say they're the two things.
Yes, that makes so much sense. It's not all events and speaking engagements, and also understanding what decisions lie with the business, understanding their business, and where you as an advisor come in. That makes perfect sense. I have one last question for you, which is, this month we're celebrating in the United States Juneteenth, which commemorates the liberation, or actually 2 years after the liberation of slaves, when slaves in Texas found out that they were free. You do this work internationally. You focus on global diversity. How do you create culturally responsive approaches and make sure that you don't just use a blanket approach in different cultural contexts?
Absolutely. I think that's a really important one, and one I've had to be really intentional about. I think it's about having a global strategy in terms of clear global principles and things that globally you stand for as a company, but then having local implementation plans. It's not about everybody doing the same thing. Just because we've launched one initiative in the UK doesn't mean we'll launch the same initiative in the US. Not every initiative is global, but the principles remain the same. If we're really thinking about progression in our own in our own company internally in Multiverse, or if we're thinking about progression for our apprentices, the principle might be that Multiverse are committed to building a senior leadership team that is representative of our wider workforce and the communities we serve. That's the global commitment, that's the principle, that's the trajectory of travel. But you might have some local implementation that really reflects the local needs and the local community and what the data is telling you about the teams on the ground. They might feel differently about a particular issue than another team does in the UK. I mean, even within one country, teams can feel very differently about different issues, or individuals can have varying opinions. So yeah, that's how I'd say I've started to think about it.
Siobhan, thank you for sharing some insight into your role, the hard work you're doing day to day, the incredible mission that Multiverse is working on and being very successful with. And just want to thank you for your time.
Thank you.